In the quiet little town of Valle Sereno, where the mornings arrived wrapped in soft mist and the birds still sang as if the world were simple, there lived a man named James. He was an older gentleman, gentle in his speech, with hands worn by time and a smile that always began in his eyes. His house was modest, a humble garden, a well-worn wooden bench, and the comforting rhythm of a life lived slowly. Each morning, James would sit outside with a warm cup of coffee, listening to the world wake up. But James was never alone. By his side was his loyal companion, a brown dog with white patches on his chest and paws. His name was Thunder, a funny name, really, since his bark was more of a playful mumble than anything fearsome. But Thunder wasn't just any dog. He was the kind that understood words, emotions, even silence. They had been together for over 7 years, ever since James found him as a trembling little puppy in a cardboard box during a storm. From that day on, they cared for one another. Thunder knew exactly when James needed quiet and when he needed company. On good days, they ran through the forest trails behind the house. James would throw sticks, and Thunder would return with a proud tail wag, like a child showing off. On warm afternoons, they shared slices of bread and shade in the backyard. And at night, James would talk to him like an old friend from childhood, and Thunder would listen, with those deep, wise eyes that never needed to reply. But not every day was peaceful. One summer night, during a dry spell, someone tried to break into James's home, but Thunder, always alert, barked with such fury that the intruders fled before they even reached the gate. The next morning, James knelt beside his dog, gently stroking his head, tears pooling in his eyes. "You protected me, old friend," he whispered. "I always knew I could count on you." And so they lived, day after day, like two old brothers, completing each other in silence, in routine, in the little things. Even with his silver hair, James still did everything himself. He tended his garden, walked to the market, and helped younger neighbors with little repairs. And Thunder was always at his side, walking proudly beside him, as if to say, "I'm here. Everything's going to be all right." No one in the neighborhood found it strange anymore. James and Thunder were part of the scenery, like the park bench or the church bell. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds when you least expect it. And what was about to happen would test everything they had built: loyalty, friendship, and love. It was an autumn morning when everything changed. Leaves drifted softly down the neighborhood streets, painting the ground in shades of copper and gold. As he always did, James left early to get fresh bread and some fruit at the corner market. Thunder wanted to come along, but James gently patted his head and said, "Just a quick trip today. Buddy, stay and watch the house for me." Thunder obeyed but stayed by the door, restless. Maybe he sensed something. Dogs always do. At the main street intersection, a car ran a red light. It was too fast for the driver, and too late for James. The impact threw him to the ground, and all he heard before passing out was the distant sound of voices rushing toward him. And then, silence. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed, both legs in casts, an IV drip in his arm, and a doctor with a serious expression telling him, "You were lucky not to have internal injuries, but you'll need complete rest for many weeks, maybe months. You won't be able to walk or take care of yourself on your own at first." James thought of many things upon hearing that: the garden, his quiet little house, but above all, he thought of Thunder. The news of the accident spread quickly through the neighborhood. Among those most worried was Mr. George, a neighbor a few blocks away, an old friend of James and also of Thunder, who had known the dog since he was a puppy. Without hesitation, Mr. George took James's spare key, fed the dog, washed his bowls, swept the yard, and tried to keep everything as close as possible to their usual routine. But Thunder was restless. He ate little, slept even less. Every night, he cried softly by the door. "Calm down, boy," George would say. "He'll come back. But for now, you need to stay here with me, okay?" He tried to keep Thunder confined in his yard, then inside his house, in vain. The first night, Thunder jumped the fence and disappeared. George ran down the street, fearing the worst. But as he rounded the corner near James's house, there was the dog, sitting, facing the empty house, as if waiting for the door to open any second. The next day was worse. Thunder disappeared before breakfast even arrived. When George reached the hospital entrance, there he was, lying under the window of James's room. The hospital security guard tried to shoo him away. A nurse tried to chase him off, but Thunder kept coming back every morning, every afternoon, rain or shine, cold or heat. Sometimes just to hear James's voice call his name through the window. "Thunder! You again! Boy, what a rascal!" And the dog wagged his tail with such enthusiasm it seemed to heal invisible wounds. James was moved every time Thunder visited. The hospital, once quiet and somber, filled with life at Thunder's arrival. The nurses grew fond of that dog with sad eyes and a joyful soul. They brought a bowl of water, a little blanket. Even the doctor smiled when he saw the scene. "That one's more committed to you than a lot of people, huh, James?" And James would answer with the kind of pride only a true friend knows. "He's family." In the following days, George tried in vain to keep the dog at home. Fences were reinforced, doors locked, collars tightened. But Thunder always found a way. He jumped, dug, chewed wood, slipped through cracks no one believed a dog that size could fit through. Loyalty knows no barriers. And so, every day, Thunder came to the hospital window, sat by the wall, and waited. Sometimes James was asleep. Other times, awake and telling stories to the dog like he used to at home. Even without touch, even without being together, they still took care of each other. Because when the legs stop, the heart keeps going, and with every beat, Thunder proved that true friendship finds ways no fence, no pain, no distance can ever stop. The weeks passed like the autumn winds, cold, steady, and quiet. Inside the hospital, James was relearning patience. Outside, Thunder remained like a clock of affection, always present, always watchful. That window, the left corner of the hospital room, became the meeting point of a love that needed no words. It was enough for James to appear on the glass, even lying down, and Thunder would wag his tail, rest his head on his paws, and close his eyes in peace. The nurses, touched by the scene, started leaving the window slightly open every day, even when the weather turned cold. One of them said, "That dog doesn't just visit, he prays." And there was truth in that. Thunder's presence was a living prayer, a constant that healed more than any medicine. James smiled more, ate better, and though his legs still didn't respond well, his spirit grew stronger than ever. But life went on outside those walls. Mr. George, ever helpful, took care of James's house, the garden, the bills. But something worried him. Thunder was getting thinner. He ate, yes. He slept, yes. But he seemed to live only for that routine of escaping and waiting, as if each day apart from James took a piece of him away. "I don't know how much longer he can hold on like this," George confessed to James's doctor during a visit. "He's strong, but it's like he's frozen in time, waiting for things to go back to normal. But will they?" And that was the first shadow of doubt that crept into James's soul. Would he walk again? Would he be able to take care of Thunder like before? He, who always believed he was the one taking care of the dog, now saw with his own eyes that it was the dog who kept him standing. And that hurt, more than any broken bone. That very week, the physical therapist brought good news. "Good news, James. If everything goes as planned, in about 3 weeks you'll be able to take your first steps with a walker. Then we'll reassess. But your recovery is better than we expected." James smiled, a small smile, but full of hope. He thought of Thunder, the leash tucked away in the closet, the dirt path to the woods. But at night, when everything was still and the hospital slept, he cried in silence. He cried out of fear that he might not keep up with his friend anymore. Out of worry that the life they had was stuck in a time that would never come back. And also, out of a new feeling, guilt. Guilt for watching his dog slowly wither away, living only for the love of someone who now depended on others to live. It was in that silence that he made a decision. The next day, he called Mr. George, looked him firmly in the eyes, and said, "Take me to the window, not in the chair. I want to feel my feet on the ground, even if just for a moment." "But James, it's still early. You could. Please, just today, just one step. I need him to see me standing." With the help of the nurses, a walker, and George's trembling hands, James got out of bed for the first time. He was sweating, his legs shaking like branches in the wind, but he was standing on the hospital sidewalk across the street. Thunder lifted his head, as if sensing a miracle, and then he saw James, fragile, bent, but standing. The joy that filled the dog was indescribable. He jumped, spun around, barked with an emotion that moved everyone nearby. People filmed, clapped. A child even cried upon seeing the silent reunion of two hearts bound by loyalty. "I told you I'd come back, my friend," James said, voice choked. "And you never stopped believing." That night, James slept with a light smile, and Thunder, under the window, lay down as if, for the first time in many days, he could finally rest. But fate, always watching, still had new paths in store. Not all easy, not all fair, because every great friendship, sooner or later, is challenged not by distance, but by the pain of things beyond our control. And what was to come next would change their lives forever. The morning was clear, the sky a calm, almost shy blue. Mr. George carefully opened the gate to James's house. The windows had been cleaned, the garden swept, and the bed moved to make it easier to get around in a wheelchair. The air smelled faintly of lavender, and on the shelves, everything looked just the same, as if time had stopped, waiting for James. But there was a deep difference. The heart of the house was beating stronger, and that was because of a dog with anxious eyes and restless paws who, upon seeing the old gate open, let out a short, almost emotional bark and ran inside. Thunder jumped on James with a contained joy, as if he knew he couldn't hurt him, but couldn't hold back so much love either. He laid his head on his friend's lap and stayed there, trembling, panting, eyes shining as if finally everything was in its place. James, seated in his chair, slowly stroked the dog's neck and said, with a choked voice, "We're home, my friend, together, just as it should be." The first days were a mix of relief and challenge. James still depended on the chair for almost everything: bathing with help, food warmed in the microwave, a bell next to the bed to call Mr. George, who now came twice a day. But even so, something was slowly returning: laughter. Thunder seemed to understand every new limit. He didn't demand long walks. He lay beside the chair, waiting for every small movement. With every small victory, a glass reached alone, an object picked up from the floor with a grabber, a step with the walker. The dog reacted as if it were a fireworks-worthy accomplishment, barking, wagging his tail, sometimes even spinning in circles like old times. More than a dog, Thunder was a living encouragement, a constant cheerleader, a reminder that there was still so much life left to live. One afternoon, James managed to walk to the old garden bench, with effort, sweat, and tears. He sat down carefully, feeling the sun on his face, the smell of the earth, and the soft breeze rustling the mulberry leaves. Thunder, ecstatic, ran around the yard like he did in his youth. He brought a stick, then another. He rolled onto his back, begging for pets. And then, for the first time since the accident, he let out a loud, happy bark, as if to say, "You really came back, you really did." James laughed, a light, freeing laugh, the kind of laugh that only comes when you've overcome a long, hard pain. "I thought I lost you for a while," he whispered to the dog, "but I think I was the one who got lost. And you found me." That night, James slept in the bed by the open window. Thunder slept on the rug, just like before, breathing calm and peaceful. The stars were visible in the sky, and the clock in the living room read 2:23 when James briefly woke and looked at the sleeping dog. He thought of everything: The hospital, the chair, the hidden tears. Then, with a shaky hand, he reached for the blanket hanging off the bed and pulled it over his body. That was all. But it was freedom. The following week, Thunder ate well again. He ran short distances again. He barked at the mailman and was gently scolded, just like old times. The light returned to his eyes, the alert expression, the joy in waiting for a new day, all came back slowly. It was as if they were healing together, and in the silent union of that house, with its scars and hopes, man and dog began again, not like before, but in a new way, deeper, truer. Because sometimes, pain transforms, but love always rebuilds. Time went on, as it always does. The scars on James's legs still ached on cold days, but he could now walk short distances with a cane. Sometimes with the help of Mr. George. Other times just with the faithful presence of Thunder, who never left his side again. And the garden began to bloom once more. There, under the shade of the mulberry tree, James spent his mornings now, sitting on his wooden bench, a warm cup of coffee in his hands, and the calm gaze of someone who had weathered the storm. Thunder lay beside him, slower, it was true, grayer, too, but there was a new sparkle in his eyes, the sparkle of one who had found his way back home. It was on a sunny Saturday that Mr. George arrived with a surprise. "I thought this one needed a home," he said, smiling as he opened the car door. Out jumped a lively puppy, big-eared and clumsy, eyes bright with curiosity and too much energy for his small body. "His name's Spark," George announced, laughing as the puppy ran circles around the yard. "I figured it was time to share this love you two taught me." Thunder eyed the little newcomer with a seasoned suspicion, but the moment Spark tried to nip his ear, he let out a resigned sigh and a soft bark, accepting the new playmate. In the days that followed, the yard became a stage for running, stumbling, and joyful barking. Thunder, though older, allowed himself to play. He ran less, but wagged his tail in a smile. Spark learned everything by watching the elder dog: where to sit to earn treats, how to roll in the grass to get attention, and most importantly, how to look at a human with unconditional love. James watched it all with moist eyes. "You two know things, don't you?" he murmured. "It takes us years to understand what you learn in silence." One calm afternoon, James wrote something in an old, worn notebook. It was a note, or maybe a prayer. He left it on the porch table, between a cup of tea and a half-empty bowl of dog food. Loyalty does not bark loud, nor demand anything. It simply remains. It waits in the rain, watches from the window, waits in silence. And when everything falls apart, it is loyalty that holds the walls of the heart. To those who have loved a dog, and to those who will, know that there are friendships that last a lifetime, and others that a lifetime is not long enough to contain. In the final scene of that day, James smiled watching the two dogs running through the yard. Thunder, now like an old master, Spark, the restless pupil, and in the middle of it all, a man, whole again, though marked, living the most beautiful reward, the love that returns, the love that remains, the love that, even when everything seems lost, always finds a way back home. The end.